Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What's the most disturbing thing that someone has casually mentioned to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was 15 years old, my mom and baby brother died in a house fire. A born-again Christian woman, family friend, told me my mom went to heaven, but my baby brother didn't because he wasn't baptized. I still hate her, 35 plus years later, and I'm an atheist now. Horrible. Back when I was a teen working a factory job, I was the new guy, sitting at lunch with these guys who just happened to casually mention how they were planning to gang rape one of the girls from the office and asked if I wanted in on that. It was way effed up if they were even joking, but they kept on about it, and details, and I truly believed they were serious about going through with it. The even more insane thing is my dad worked in that office. They knew exactly who I was, it's how I got the job. And that girl worked for my dad, and they still effing went on about it. Of course I told him, and of course they didn't work there anymore after that. Shit still really effing bothers me, and every few years I tell it on Reddit. I smell the seats of attractive girls when they get up at a movie theater. He went on to say, he's usually last one out of the theater for this reason. I piss inside my wife when we have sex because I want her to get an infection. Same guy. Ugh. I was tattooing him, and he divulged so much that I tuned him out. He was a creepy little F with long greasy brown hair and Coke bottle glasses. Once I was done, I got the money and told the owners never let him back into the shop. I was also the second in the shop to tattoo him. He completely freaked out, the first artist who went and hid when he came back in the second time. My reaction to this next story went something like this after I read it. What? I knew my coworker was divorced, and she finally mentioned that they divorced because he had an affair with their daughter, who was a minor at the time, and how could I compete with that? The rest of us didn't know what to say, so we tried to change the subject. I honestly don't think she understood that her husband raped their child. I had an older gentleman who moved into my complex who hit on me every time I went to get my mail. He really creeped me out from day one, but I assumed he was harmless as he mainly just flirted with me but left me alone otherwise. The last interaction I had with him, he followed me back to my front porch, which was abnormal because he usually only spoke to me at the mailbox. He began telling me how he was setting out cat food cans with rat poison to kill the stray cats in the complex, and I said, "That's upsetting, I hope that isn't true." To which he responded that he didn't see many men coming to my apartment and how easy it is for him to hide in the woods where no one can see him. I began backing away slowly, and he laughed and kept talking about how good of a hunter he was. I interrupted him, saying my phone was ringing, and went inside, locking the door behind me. I spent the night at a friend's, and thankfully my lease was up within a month and a half, so I moved the hell out of there. The weird part was, I never physically saw him again, but I get the feeling he was watching me. For the rest of my lease, I would either have friends stay over with me or go to their places. I didn't feel safe staying in the apartment alone. Got cheated on by somebody who I truly loved, and honestly he didn't seem the type that would, and it made no sense. It ripped my heart out and sent my depression spiraling. I'm talking about it one day, which was the first time I'd talked a lot since it happened, and my mom just looks at me and casually says to me, "There are two types of women in this world. Women men want to F, and women that men make do with when they have had their fun because they know they will get kids and their meals cooked, etc., but they will always chase the ones they want to F, knowing us make-do women will always be at home." She said herself and me were the make-do women, and that's all I'd ever be, just a reliable end option for men who had their fun. I would never be somebody a man lusted for. This was the same woman who threatened to drown my hamster when I was 5 for playing up, the same woman who actually put him in the bath and turned on the water, leaving me fighting to save him, so I guess her response about cheating shouldn't surprise me. One of my best friends was in an abusive relationship early in our friendship. I was under the impression it was largely emotional and financial abuse, and I was so proud of her when she got away from that vile man. Not long ago, the topic of this guy came up, and she just casually was like, "Oh yeah, I left because he started holding a gun to my head saying he was going to kill me." Like, Jesus Christ. And I feel awful that I didn't recognize things had progressed to that point. I used to work at Boscov's last year. It's a department store like Macy's. I worked in the young men's department full time. There was this guy who would come in every once in a while to shop. I don't really talk to him because he's kind of awkward, but anyways, I was 24 at the time and he came up to me while I was folding clothes and asked me if I had a boyfriend. I did at the time. The man looked like he was in his 60s and wasn't at all attractive, but after he asked me, I said yes. Then he told me about how quiet I am, and I looked like I kept to myself. He said he was looking for that in a woman. He left and came back 5 minutes later and told me not to tell anyone he said that to me. I had already told my manager, and we laughed because he was a creep. This next story reminded me of something that happened in my life when I was a kid. I saw Nightmare on Elm Street way too young, and it messed me up. Did anything do that to you when you were young? Not sexually creepy, but still disturbing to me. When I was 11, I was at a church picnic function. The leader of the activity started telling us true religious stories. I've never forgotten one story, and it still scares me. She stated that one night she woke up to something messing with her uncovered feet. She looked to the end of the bed and saw a demon pulling her off the bed towards him. She said she screamed, and her husband woke up and saw it too. They supposedly prayed, and it went away, but she knew it was still waiting for the opportunity to drag her to hell. WTF. It scared me so bad that I still can't sleep with my feet uncovered no matter how hot it is. I know that it was not real, but the fear is still there. It is funny how silly things can affect you and follow you throughout life. I think she got off scaring kids, which is even scarier since she was a youth leader. She left the church months later after her affair with another parishioner was found out. I work at a hospital as a CNA, and I was a sitter for this one patient who was impulsive and would try to climb out of bed constantly. He was older with dementia. Towards the end of my shift, he confesses to me that he murdered an older woman when he was younger and robbed her after. She had cash, and she hid under her mattress, and he stole it all. He told me he'd kept that secret his whole life. I'm not sure if that confession was true or not, as he had dementia and said odd things that whole day. I often wonder to this day if what he said was true, and I had witnessed an actual confession of a murder. Back when I briefly worked at a daycare, a few parents and I got into a haha boys will be boys story sharing. They would talk about their kids while I'd bring up the dumb shit I did as a kid. I was and still am single with no kids. And then this one mother drops a bomb nobody was prepared for. She mentions that her two older sons in high school would regularly walk around the house wearing a shirt but nothing else after taking a shower. And they'd smack the youngest son, who was around 9 years old and was under my care, in the face with their penises when they pass him in the halls. Everyone's looking at her in what the F did I just hear sort of way, but she was just laughing it off like it's completely normal behavior. When I was in junior high, a weird kid I befriended just dropped one day on the bus that his older brother was raping him, and that this was just how things were. And since I had little brothers, I'd probably rape them someday. I was so sheltered I couldn't even imagine how this worked, and I just kept to myself. I guess I should have told an adult, but I didn't. I was just dropping off my fiancée at her place after a great date night when a drunk guy walks up to my car window and knocks on it, almost apologetically. His eyes were just completely lost and empty, like a dog that's been beaten too many times, and he was wearing a sarap blanket around his naked shoulders. I rolled my window partway down and asked him what he needed. He sighed and sat down on the curb, his shoeless feet in the gutter. "I just need a ride up the hill, man." He pointed up the road. "It's like 7 miles, and I'm tired and my feet hurt." I don't typically pick up hitchhikers. I've had a few bad experiences with people, enough to be gun-shy. I considered for a moment, then motioned him over. "You have any weapons on you?" He shook his head. "Nah, man, I don't even have socks." I turned to look at my fiancée. She kissed me and got out. "Stay safe," she said. "Keep your head on a swivel." I watched her until she was inside, then told him to get in. He sat down. "Buckle up," I told him. "And here's the gig. Stay on your side, one way, no side trips. I'm armed and I will not hesitate to end you if you F around. These are my terms. You can come with me or you can stay. Your call." He considered this for a second. "Cool," he said. "Let's go." We pulled out onto the main road, driving past the empty old industrial buildings and tenements. Streetlights flickered in on the dusk, casting city shadows across the broken asphalt. He started talking, slowly at first, and quicker as we drove. He was Native American, with roots in Arizona. He liked the heat there. It was too cold here. He missed his family, but he couldn't go back. He wouldn't be welcomed. He started sobbing as he told me that he had stabbed his brother-in-law in a fit of drunken rage, leaving him bleeding on the floor of his trailer. He panicked and called his brothers. They came over and found the kid sitting in a corner, slowly bleeding out. He had stabbed him twice, deep with a hunting knife. The blade had gone into one lung and his liver. It was still embedded in his side. When they got to him, nobody knew what to do, so one of them lifted the guy onto a bed and tried to make him comfortable. Then they pulled the knife out of his liver. He said the gush of warm blood that followed saturated the blankets in seconds, and they watched his eyes fade away. He was terrified of facing his sister, of the revenge that was sure to follow, so he ran, as far away as he could. He slept under bridges and in abandoned buildings and forgot what they used to call him. He shook as he told me. I don't even remember my own name, man. He threw away his wallet and crushed his phone on a lonely stretch of train track somewhere in the desert. That was 20 years ago. We drove the rest of the way in silence. What was there to say? He stared out the window into the darkness, just a husk of a human being. When we stopped, I gave him a spare pair of my socks and a few cans of food that I always keep in the back of my car. He told me he hadn't eaten in days. I told him that he should go back and face the music, maybe find some rest for his soul. He shook his head again, sadly. No rest, man. No rest for me. I'm headed to hell, I know. The devil owns my soul. Then he raised the can of stew and the socks. Thanks, he mumbled, and he was gone into the night. Mr. Krabs is the only crab in Bikini Bottom. There's only one episode of SpongeBob with crabs in it, but after that they're all gone, all except for Mr. Krabs. He runs the Krusty Krab, which is in the shape of a crab trap. The Krabby Patties are made of crab, therefore Mr. Krabs is a cannibal. When I was in 7th grade, around 13 years old, my classmate told me that another one of the girls in our class thought it would be funny to leave me alone with the group of older guys in my school who wanted to grope me. My friend warned me about it beforehand, so nothing happened, but yeah, it made me sick to my stomach. There was one of those book fairs going on at school, so they were going to do it in one of the empty classrooms. Not creepy, but a bit odd. My buddy Bates said, well, I'm going to go to my room and say a little Christmas prayer for all the baby giraffes out there with no mothers. And he left. Don't know if he was joking or not. Not really disturbing, but it was kind of weird to me. My neighbor once called me aside from my family during my birthday and told me, you and your family are going to die a gruesome death because of your brother. Being homosexual is a sin, and I know you know that. Jesus does not accept that. My brother came out as gay at the time. The lady was never invited, and we weren't even Christian. It's more scary to me because I was 11, and she thought she'd be able to shape my young mind more better. She ruined my birthday that day. Don't let her. I was like 10, swimming in a public pool when some guy probably in his late 20s, early 30s swam up to me and was like, hey kid, want to swim underwater and look at girls' butts? I got out and hung with my parents after that. A guy at my work was arrested a couple of years ago for child porn. We were keeping up with the case to see what was happening with it. I mentioned it a few weeks ago, and one of my coworkers new to our shift just blurted out that she completely supported him and he did nothing wrong, even though there were mountains of obvious evidence that he had child porn and shared it with people publicly. I noped right out of that conversation. Once, a couple and their adopted son came to my house to do a little visit, and the boy told me his older adoptive brother was showing him pictures of naked people all the time. I was 10 and had no idea what it really meant. Today I feel so guilty I didn't tell him or even my parents about this. It makes me sick to think what he might have been through. I hope he's okay. Things you should see in a cornfield. Corn. Things you should not see in a cornfield. This. My sibling and I were in a cornfield alone, and an old dude came up to us and said there was a body buried underneath us. When we told our parents, they said he was probably kidding. But why would someone randomly say that to two 8-year-olds in the middle of a field?